What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Roots. So I'm going to review the third album by rapper Webbie. Basically, this product is called Savage Life 3 and it came out in the fall of 2011. So the thing about this particular product is just the fact that Webbie had a particular huge early 2008 with the hit album Savage Life 2 as far as pitches like that kind of happen. I remember giving that album like a 10 out of 10 back in the fall of 2023. Definitely enjoyed that album quite a bit. I'd have to say pretty much like a southern rap classic, especially out of the late 2000s. But the problem with it was Webbie took a pretty sizable break between early 2008 Savage Life 2 to late fall of 2011's Savage Life 3. It was kind of a particular concept. He wasn't really featured on too many folks' songs between the second half of 2008, all of 2009, and 2010, and most of 2011. So it was damn near 4 years that he took off between those two particular albums. Really, Savage Life 2 only had one true hit single. I mean, the other song, I Miss You, that was the second single off of Savage Life 2, didn't really chart that heavily. So after basically about midwinter 2008, Webbie basically disappeared and just didn't have really any promoted songs or really much to have for like a backdrop between like the almost 4 year gap to Savage Life 3. Now on top of that, like Lil Boosie went to prison for approximately, he was going to go to prison for 8 years. He went to prison in 2009, and then it got doubled to 4 years, and then it got doubled to 8 years. So Lil Boosie was going to be in prison for a while back in 2009, 2010, pitches like that. So he wasn't able to help out with Lil Boosie's projects past like the ones that he did before going to prison, like Superbad and Incarcerated, some of those type ones. And then Fox didn't put out an album in 2010, which was kind of a disappointment because he had a pretty quality album off his Street Gossip album from 2007. So basically, the Trill ENT empire had kind of almost damn near collapsed in like the early 2010s. It's kind of the concept. But Webbie tried to hold the ground pretty strong. This is actually a pretty relatively solid album here. It has more hits than misses, I would have to say. It's not as much of a full blown classic compared to like Savage Life 2, but I do feel like it definitely has some gems on here. The main reason why it's not as much of a full blown classic is just because Webbie doesn't. I mean, Webbie definitely nails like the turn up songs and pitches like that. It's a little bit more localized, more house party type fair pitches like that. Definitely has some of that evening dredge, but some of these differential type moments, like there's a song dedicated to Lil Boosie's mother and father on here. Both those are on separate songs as far as pitch like that can happen. There's just some moments on here like a keep your head up type moment. Some of these more kind of homely type songs. There's a decent portion of some of these. There's actually more than, I mean, normally some of these would only be like two or three. Just some folks would only have like two or three of those songs, but there's actually like five of these particular homely type songs. Webbie just doesn't nail the vibe on this particular album. I'd say it's just kind of the concept about it, but yeah, there's some, for the most part, pretty enjoyable moments, but a lot of this is just a lot of localized type stuff to kind of get here. Just being able to say it just kind of takes it back to more, not necessarily underground type fare, but pretty close to it. More of like Tech Nine and Twisted type territory as to what those folks were kind of doing in like the early 2010s pitches like that, Hobson type territory, some of those type folks, as far as that would particularly kind of happen. Webbie is just kind of where Webbie wasn't necessarily underground, but it's just kind of the concept that apart from like the cat Lil Fat, who is unfortunately deceased, and then Bobby V, and then Lil Trill, there weren't a ton of folks who really helped promote this particular product for feature wise type stuff. I'd say there's no Rick Ross and Birdman on here. There's no Latoya Luckett on here. There's no, I mean, with Lil Boosie being in prison, he's not on here. So there's just not too many. There is another cat named KT that does a hook on here, which is a pretty good R&B hook, I'd have to say. But for the most part, this is a more in-house type of affair that just doesn't have the bravado. So definitely, it's not so much that Webbie lost money around this particular time, but it's just more in-house and just kind of went back. It just, I don't want to say downgraded in terms of quality, but just kind of went back to typical fanfare that he was back in like the gangsta music days from 2004, some of those type pitches. But still a pretty quality album, I'd say. Definitely has some good gems on here. More than half the album definitely has that appeal. But as a result, there was only one single off this particular product, and that's just the hit song, What's Happening. And this is definitely one of Webbie's best songs. This has a lot of ferocious energy. This is a house party smash. Definitely thoroughly enjoy this song. This might be one of my favorite Webbie songs, period, I'd have to say, in terms of the overall impact behind it. It's too bad that this song didn't chart a lot heavier. Mouse on the Track really knocked this one out of the park. Just an overall impactful type one. Lil Fat's on here, which is a bolsterment of this particular type stuff. So it's a good concept that this Webbie and Lil Fat hold it down as far as pitches like that kind of happen. This has some good relative appeal. You just kind of had to know about it more as far as that would kind of happen with this. It's a good concept. It's turning it back to like the original type days, pretty much pre-Savage Life from early 2005, 2004 gangsta music type days. This Webbie more evolved as he particularly kind of got around that particular time. It's just kind of the concept. But yeah, so I'll go ahead and talk about the songs I recommend on here, and then we'll get towards it. So basically, out of 16 songs in this particular album, I wound up recommending 10 and a half. So it's a good concept to kind of get that 10 songs and then one almost song. So I look after it. Basically, that's only real 5 songs I don't recommend in some full blown fashion. But the lead single, like I was saying, was What's Happening. Once again, this is one of Webbie's best songs that I at least. This is one of Webbie's best songs, at least in my opinion, as far as that particular kind of happens. This is a very inspired Webbie song, I'd have to say, just like the concept of it. Really felt like this should have charted a lot heavier than it did, but I just feel like the 3.5 years that he took off, I feel like most folks probably had forgotten about him, considering that he wasn't really featured on anyone's songs in 2009, 10, or 11 for the most part. But What's Happening is definitely like a riveting, kind of vicious neighborhood turn up of a song. I would definitely have to say it's like a house party Kickstarter, I would definitely suppose. And it's like some good loud pack lead single type for it's like some good loud pack lead single type fare as far as that particular kind of happens. So it definitely has a lot of this overall thrilling type vibes kind of get on here. Has some synthy type fare that reminds of like a West Coast type song. This really nails that particular pitch. It's real good house party type noise to kind of get within that aspect. It's a real nice thump of one to kind of get here. Basically, just an alarmingly good type hit to kind of have within that fashion. I like the fact that Lil Fat was on here. It's just a good concept that even despite the fact that Webbie supposedly not necessarily lost his budget, but just kind of reverted back to like his old days pre fame pitches like that. It has supposed just a good concept that the budget was at least there to be able to put out some stock hits and just gems like this. If there had been another single like this, that definitely would have been pretty thrilling. But it's just kind of the concept of this is like a real roundabout, just kind of back to basics type album. But I like the quality of it because it doesn't lose like the impact of what happened. So Webbie is back on his usual bullshit as far as this particular kind of happens, back to like Savage Life 1 type days before he had really got the colossal fame. But it's not to say this is a bad album. So I kind of look after it. But yeah, that's the product of this particular album. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about the 10 and a half songs I recommend on here. So the 10 and a half songs I recommend would be What's Happening, Baddest in Here, Shoddy No, Rubber Tonight, In This Bitch, Bounce That, Mo Ass, Trilla Than a Bitch, I Do 'Em All, What You Want, and then the almost song is Right Now. So the almost song Right Now, I recommend like a halfway sentence just because this is like a basic kind of hazy get to it type song to kind of say about that in particular. It's like a forlorn kind of evening dredge. I would definitely feel like some decent motivation about this particular song. Definitely a good smoke a few and then get to Aaron's type tune to kind of get here. It's like the concept of it. I mean, this is like a basic kind of mod. I mean, the energy about this song is real mid grades as far as that particular kind of happens. Just a mid grades kind of hustle tune to kind of get. It's a little bit forlorn just within the aspect of it. Just kind of has like a slug kind of degree of like not necessarily jadedness, but this kind of real talk, like, hey, this is like shit's real out there type tone as far as that particular pitch kind of goes along with it. It's just kind of a feeling some type of way type music to kind of get within this aspect. I mean, I feel like this is a solid enough song. I do halfway recommend it, but this is kind of the aspect of me saying the overall addictiveness of that particular song just doesn't have as much full blown impact as what it probably needs. I mean, it's a decent kind of get to the money type song, but just kind of the impact behind it that it just doesn't have as much full blown kind of just overall addictiveness. I'd have to say, but it's a relatively just kind of a modest hit. I'd have to say, but there are some ones on here like I do feel like Shoddy knows a pretty nice one. This says Bobby V, which is basically like the only other big name guest on here apart from some Trill ENT cats, Lil Trill and Little Fat as far as pitches like that kind of happen. But Shoddy knows like a slinky kind of classic Trill ENT ladies gem. I would definitely have to say this reminds me of like the little boozy days from like Badass and Super Bad. Some of those type pitches are like the mid 2000s type fair when Boozy put out all those projects. It's like a nice Bobby V cameo. I would definitely feel like he's kind of underappreciated around these particular times. I would just have to say Bobby V blew up in like mid 2000s, late 2000s, but didn't really crest much past about 2010, 2011 or so. But this is a pretty good concept to see him on the song. It's like a woozy hit. The song has some woozy kind of hit charm about it. I would definitely suppose. So this probably could have been the second single, something like that would have been a pretty good concept. This basically Webbie doing like a little boozy style type song to kind of get here. Just real good concept. This reminds me of like the same sitar kind of guitar type twang of like "Fuck You" from like a Lil Boozy's song off Badass. Just some pitches like that. It's a good concept. It's typical kind of Trill ENT type fare. Mo Ass is a pretty nice one. This is like a good night venue noise of a song. I'd have to say is like a factory hit for like white noise. I would feel like this being out and about during like some outing job. I would have to say, and it's like a get twisted kind of simp type song to kind of get here. Simp with the chicas as far as pitches like that kind of go. It's a good song to enjoy just out and about it. I'd say in like night commerce. So it's a good concept for that. It's basically Slinky type 1. Just get twisted on this particular type song. It's a good concept to have some smoke, some drink in your system as far as that particular kind of happens with it. Good overall fanfare. Baddest in here is a pretty nice one. It's like a thumping kind of local noise with song I would definitely have to say is like a good get ready for like a spicy night. I would have to suppose good concept for that. And it's like some evening excitement I'd have to say, and it's just this is a good song to get. This is a good song for some supplies to get. So just the concept of just picking up like a box of Swishers, some pitches like that, getting like some smoke edge, some drink, some of that type fare, some Chex Mix, some overall, some Lay's chips, some of those type fares, just getting some snaggage, some 2 liters, some of that type fare to get really get crunk for the night. Just a good concept for some of that poundingness. I feel like this song, Baddest in here, along with What's Happening, are some nice ones for like that house party type fare. There's definitely some other ones like that. We'll get to some more of these. I feel like In This Bitch is another one, some of these type ones. So yeah, but Baddest in here definitely has some of that standard thump as far as that particular kind of habs with it. Just some good local kickstarters kind of get with some of that relative noise. Just good concepts for that. Trilla Then a Bitch is a pretty nice one as well. I do appreciate this concept. This is like a dredgy kind of summer haze of a song, I'd have to say. This reminds of UGK. I would definitely feel like definitely some UGK type slog, typical fanfare that you would have heard Pimp C, Bun B on, some of those type folks. It's a good concept for some of that Texas kind of haze. It's like some evening drab. I would definitely feel like it's like some evening drab kind of cruise out fare. I would definitely have to say, and it's like a good song to get some tasks done just within the concept of it. It's more drab just because Webbie's kind of in a more kind of riled up type mood. It's definitely the concept of like that standard fare, just kind of being pissed off in the whips and pitches like that. Just kind of like the this kind of fed up type music, just kind of getting particular. But it's just a good concept, kind of have some of that just for like the unwind, maybe just pick up some Popeye, something like that, and just smoke one to ease the mind as far as pitches like that kind of happen. Was just kind of the standard rumination, like a more just kind of vocal type sense. Good concept for that. Little Fats on that song, which is surprising, but In This Bitch is another good house party type one to kind of get here. It's like a late 2000s kind of pounder. I would definitely have to say this song reminds me of First Night from Savage Life 2. I'd have to say a good concept to kind of have that in particular. Some good stuff there. It's like a good house party kind of commotion. I'd have to say in Rumbler, I would definitely feel like this song has some good knock about it. So it's just a good assortment of some of these. Webbie definitely has some house party type fare to kind of get towards that. The Red Cup type music, beer pong type music, get some pitches like that, get some Smirnoff Ice, some of those type pitches, just in real good crunkage to kind of get tore up to into some of that type fare. So I have to say. What You Want is a pretty nice one, as well as like a throwback kind of late 2000s Get Money and Bustle song. I would definitely feel like some standard fare, just one of those 2009 Pitbull, Tayo Cruz type hustle type songs, just within a starry-eyed type sense. It's the standard concept. You've heard songs like this back in late 2008, 2009. Just folks that kind of did that in particular. Can't really think it's full blown, but just a Tayo Cruz kind of like Jay-Z Blueprint 3S type stuff, just within that relative pitch. Some of those type of folks that are just more ground level within that relative sense. This is like a litty evening work shift unwind of a song. I'd have to say a good concept for that. And this is just a song to listen to when in a good mood. I'd have to say so it's just a pretty good pitch. This particular song, What You Want, probably could have been a pretty good buzz single to have kind of gotten here. It does have some relative commercial bite about it. It's just kind of the concept of just, I feel like the factoid was just about it that Webbie was just kind of distant from like his prime years. I definitely feel like he probably should have at least had like a buzz single, something like that, that he should have put out in like summer 2008 or fall of 2008, just something to kind of keep his name out there. Because Independent was a pretty damn good song. It was definitely one of his biggest songs, but it just took too long for him to follow up that particular song. I feel like most folks had probably well past forgotten about him by that particular point. This album definitely does have some commercial appeal. I feel like What You Want at least has like that relative kind of hustle song, late 2000s hustle song type bustle about a good buzz single for that. Shawty Knows a pretty good standard Trill ENT classic lady song like Lil Boozy. What's Happening is just a very ferocious kind of house party type single to kind of get. There's just some pitches like that. And then there's just more than a few house party type songs on here to kind of get that just are like for a pretty raucous overall night, I'd have to say. So it's good concepts. I Do 'Em All is another nice hit to kind of get here. There's like a good pairing with Shawty No. I would definitely feel like this like a basic kind of low key radio ready Chica's gem. I would definitely have to suppose this like some evening commerce slog, I would feel like. So it's just nice pitch to kind of get some of these just as far as I would particularly kind of have. And couple good lady songs kind of get on here. This KT Cat does a pretty good job with that particular pitch as far as that would kind of happen. Another dredgy one that kind of goes with Trilla Then a Bitch and some of those type songs. Just another one that was kind of like that on here. I don't remember is full blown. But oh yeah, I would say Right Now, some of those type ones, just standard fare. So I do like the concept of Webbie. This is kind of a new angle for Webbie, just within a relative pitch. I mean, he did do some of this on Savage Life, but it was just a little bit more recreational. A lot of this just feels a little bit more like hey, I got to get to my shit, some pitches like that, got to get towards it, get these bills paid, figure out what I'm going to do, get this money, some of that type fare, just standard lace things up just within that relative commerce. I mean, that was on Savage Life, wasn't as much on Savage Life 2, but it was. It's kind of something to bring back from like the Savage Life 1 type days, maybe a little bit of like gangsta music from 2004. Just kind of the concept of being straight laced in addition to some of these turn up type fairs. It's just very localized. I look after this concept. This is interesting enough to kind of be like a blue collar kind of low key rap type album to kind of get here, where it has some of that blue collar type fare, but then it also has like the localized type fare of what happens once everything's taken care of. So it just kind of balances that pretty well, in addition to some of these homely type songs that we're going to talk about that I don't recommend. I think that about covers all the songs. I think I haven't talked about Rubber tonight though. So this is like a throwback kind of 2000s nightclub energy, I would have to say. This reminds me of like the snap rap days. I would definitely feel like this is definitely a good one to smoke a few and some social kickoff, I would have to suppose. Yeah, Rubber Tonight is just vintage Boozy and Webbie from like the old days. That has a pretty good throwback type concept. Kind of get that one in particular. Pretty good mouse on the track type beat here, I would have to say. Just really nails it with like the delivery and execution as far as those pitches kind of have with it. Just a good enough concept kind of have for some of that type fare. Another good standard one for like some house party type fare. Just a number of these on here just continue to have that hit quality. So it's just a good enough concept to really have some of that thrilling type turn up just with the balance of like the rest of this album, I'd have to say. So that's the basic concept about this particular album in terms of the songs I recommend. Just being able to say, I think I talked about every single one of these. That I recommend the 10.5 ones here. Maybe I didn't talk about Bounce That. I'll go ahead and talk about Bounce That as well. It's like a vanilla kind of strip club and basic night venue rumbler. I'd have to say, pretty good concept for that. It's like a typical outing in like a sense. Bounce That is some typical kind of outing fun, I'd have to say, and it's like a dredgy kind of night activity, I'd have to say. So Bounce That sounds a little bit more contemporary. Sounds more like this nightclub type turn up circa like the early 2010s as far as pitch like that kind of happened. Just a little bit of a step out type, just a little bit of some step out type rumble to kind of get here. Some good concepts to kind of have for some of that. The thing about this particular product is just the fact that it doesn't really as full blown pay attention to like the trends that were kind of popping off in like the early 2010s. I'd have to say like the standard sound that like Future, Gucci Mane, Yo Gotti, Waka Flocka, some of those type folks were doing in 2011. This one, almost, I don't want to say sounds detached, but really didn't pay as much full blown attention. It kind of still feels like music from like 2008, 2009. It feels like this is more a product of like the late 2000s, more so than the early 2010s. I look after it, but just the concept of a lot of these, this sounds like this definitive kind of Trill ENT sound that they did in like the mid 2000s, early 2000s, late 2000s. But I look after the concept. This is just like an update in Webbie's particular sound as far as that pitch goes, has those same similarities, continues that trend, really nails it pretty well. But in terms of like something that at least sounds somewhat contemporary, I feel like what's happening is definitely a pretty nice one to get within that sense, that real vicious type one. I'd probably say the closest thing to something that sounds like something that's trendy to like 2011 and 2012 as far as pitches like that kind of happen probably would be Bounce That. But for the most part, this is pretty much like the Trill ENT sound like the whole way through. It's not like there's a problem with that. It's just kind of the concept. I just knows that it's not as mixtape, real savvy and trap type savvy as far as that kind of happens. But at least for some of that strip club type turn up, Bounce That kind of has that. Maybe a little bit of Mo Ass, some of those type ones would kind of have that particular pitch, I'd have to say. This kind of happens to be a thing. But yeah, so that's the concept of this album. So me recommending basically 10.5 songs out of 16 on here. I'm going to go ahead and give this album like a 7.75 out of 10. Definitely a pretty good pitch to get that. But talk about some of these 5 songs I didn't recommend on here. Basically songs like Keep Your Head Up, Mama, Pops I Love You, Made Nigga, some of those type ones. Just particularly were more homely type songs I just didn't appreciate the concept of. It's not, I mean, I like the concept of him at least trying to do like Tupac, Eminem, Tech Nine type vibes to at least attempt some of this. But just the concept of these particular, the production fare is what really slags these particular songs. It's the overall impact. You can just tell that these are more softcore type songs. They just don't really have the affluence behind really nailing it. It's what you see is what you get on some of these, but just I feel like the concepts behind it, unless you're in a more homely type mode, it just didn't really jump off the page that well. And then the song I've Been Here is kind of around the neighborhood type tune, another hood type song to kind of get within that relative sense. This reminds me somewhat of something that Gucci Mane, Waka Flocka, some of those mixtape rappers would have kind of done, but it just didn't really jump off the page as much full blown. I mean, it's a good beat within a relative sense. Definitely reminds me like a Zaytoven or Gucci Mane type beat, something like definitely reminds me like a Zaytoven or Gucci Mane type beat. Some of those type folks that would have done that low key typeness. Definitely some localized kind of more residential type fare and like a more ghetto and hood type sense. Just some good house party turn up, some good localized type turn up. It's not really like a house party type song or as much like a real ravenous kind of shindig type song, but it's just kind of the concept of just basically around the neighborhood, maybe smoke a few, just residential type fare. But I just didn't see how often I would really listen to this particular type song. Just didn't really have like the addictiveness of saying It's not a bad song. It's just kind of the concept of not one. I just would realize how many times I'd return to it. I'd say so. I'm just not going to recommend that one. But yeah, 7.75 score. I'd say the social score. I'm going to go ahead and give like an 8.75 because there's a lot of good affluence about this product. The lady songs really hit pretty heavily on here. I do like the evening dredge and just wrapping up work shift and blue collar type fare, just the standard dredge, just some of that of just getting tasks done. And there are plenty of house party songs on here. Like I said, one of Webbie's just best overall songs and singles, I would have to say, is definitely on this particular project. He really sounds inspired. I liked all these little fat cameos, little trills pretty good on here as well. Like the Bobby V hook and the KT hook of these R&B singers. So it just has some excellent icons. So this is actually pretty balanced. It just needed probably one, two, or three more hit songs to back up this project a little bit further. If it had been slashed like two songs, this probably would have been damn near on the cusp of getting like a 10 out of 10, something like that. But I just feel like for 16 songs, I feel like 10 or 11 is a little bit shy of like what probably needs to full blown kind of be. This is not a bad update, and like the Savage Life saga, I'd have to say it's just kind of the concept that just didn't full blown pack it to the gills like it probably needed to, I'd have to say. So 8.75 social. In terms of the future, like Webbie has not dropped an album since 2020. There are 6 of these Savage Life projects in addition to some more mixtapes. So I'm definitely going to get to some more Webbie down the road. I'd have to say this has an excellent type fare to kind of get here. It's pretty good. Like I would still fuck with this particular product. Like I said, it's not downgraded in terms of quality, but it's just more back to basics type fare, just as far as that aspect kind of happens. But I look after it, this is an essential type one to kind of get. Once again, it just has like it just is probably snagged by a couple songs more than it just has like a couple snags on here that just keep it from being like a classic, I'd have to say.